I worked the overnight shift at a Sinclair off exit 312 on I-80, about 40 miles west of Grand Island, Nebraska, 10 at night to 6 in the morning, 4 nights a week. This was January 2020, right before everything got weird for other reasons. The place sat back from the frontage road, 2 islands, 4 pumps each, a bigger diesel canopy off to the side for the trucks. Inside was just me, a coffee station, some roller grill food that got sadder every hour, and shelves of jerky and Advil and cheap phone chargers. The nearest anything was a Love's about 18 miles east. Winter shifts were slow. On a Tuesday between 3 and 5, I could go a full hour without seeing a car. Just me, the fluorescent hum, and the wind pushing against the front doors so they rattled in the frame every couple of minutes. That night, I had a book open on the counter and half a cup of coffee going cold. I remember I checked the clock at 3:58 because I was trying to decide if I could get away with mopping early. The security monitor by the register showed the lot empty. The road outside was black, then the whole lot lit up. Not like one set of headlights, all at once. I looked up and there were 7 vehicles rolling in off the eastbound ramp in a line, headlights spaced evenly, like beads on a string, not tailgating, not stretched out, same distance between every car, the way you'd space them if someone was measuring. 4 SUVs, 2 sedans, 1 van at the back, all dark, navy or black, hard to tell under the sodium light. Nebraska plates on the first 2, I could see that much. The rest I couldn't read yet. They pulled in and split. It looked choreographed. 2 vehicles went to the far pumps, 2 to the near, 2 parked in the spaces along the front where you'd sit and eat, and the van eased around to the diesel side even though it was a passenger van and didn't need diesel. Every one of them killed the engine at almost the same second. You know how a parking lot at a rest stop sounds when a family stops, doors popping open one by one, kid yelling, somebody saying they need to pee. This was not that. Every door opened together. That's the part I remember most. People got out. I counted later on the footage. 29, men and women, mixed ages, though most looked between 30 and 50. All of them in the same jacket. Dark navy, no logo I could see. Cut like a fleece shell, zipped to the throat, jeans or work pants under, boots. They moved. 3 walked directly to the pumps and started fueling. 2 came toward the door. 4 peeled off toward the side of the building where the ice machine is, and stood there, just stood, facing the road, not talking, not on phones, watching the ramp. A woman went around back where the dumpster is. I saw her on the exterior camera on my monitor. She walked the perimeter, slow, looked up at each corner of the roof, then came back. The 2 who came inside walked past me without a glance. One got a coffee, the other went to the back cooler and pulled 2 waters. A third came in behind them, went to the food aisle, and took a handful of granola bars and a bag of jerky, then a 4th, then a 5th. They didn't line up, they just came to the counter as they finished, one at a time, in an order that made sense only if they had worked it out beforehand. Each one set their stuff down, tapped a card on the reader, waited for the beep, took the receipt, and walked out. Not one of them said a word to me. Not hi, not thanks, not a nod. I said morning to the first one out of pure habit. He looked at me, held it maybe a second longer than felt normal, then looked back at the card reader. After that, I stopped talking. The cards were all different. I remember that because I was staring at the reader by then, trying to catch anything. Different banks, different colors. One was a corporate card with a name printed on it that I couldn't read upside down and didn't dare turn to look at. Every transaction cleared on the first tap. While the inside crew moved, I glanced at the monitor. The 4 by the ice machine had rotated. 2 of them were now looking at the road. 2 were looking at the pumps. The woman who had walked the perimeter was standing at the far corner of the lot with her hands in her jacket pockets, facing east. Not moving, not shifting her weight, just standing. I want to say the silence outside was strange, but that's not quite it. There was still wind. There was still the click of the pumps. What was missing was people noise. 30 people in a parking lot in the middle of the night, and I couldn't hear a single voice. Not a laugh, not a cough. The pumps clicked off almost together, within maybe 10 seconds of each other. 2 of the fuelers replaced the nozzles and got back in. The others waited for them. Nobody rushed, nobody stretched or yawned or dug around for a snack. They moved back to their cars in the same order they had left them. The perimeter woman was the last one to move. She turned from the east, walked in a straight line to the van, and got in the passenger side. Every door closed together. Every engine started together. The lead SUV rolled toward the ramp, and the rest fell in behind at the same spacing they had come in with. Beads on a string, back onto I-80, westbound this time. Their taillights got smaller, and then they were gone. I looked at the clock. 4:06, 8 minutes. I actually said it out loud. 8 minutes. Because that felt important, though I couldn't tell you why yet. I stood at the counter for a while after, maybe a full minute. My hands were on the counter, and I was staring at the door. The coffee I hadn't finished was still there, and I couldn't bring myself to pick it up. The first thing I did was walk the aisles. I don't know what I expected to find. The store was fine. Nothing moved, nothing missing that shouldn't be, nothing left behind. The food gaps on the shelves were exact. 6 granola bars taken, 2 waters, 3 coffees, a bag of jerky, 1 pack of gum, all accounted for on the register tape when I pulled it later. The second thing I did was write down the plates. I had caught the first 2 SUVs on the way in, and I had been thinking about them the whole time they were parked. I wrote them on the back of a receipt with a Bic pen and put it in my apron pocket. Then I went to the office and pulled up the exterior camera and paused it on each vehicle. I got 4 more plates that way. The van's plate was too dirty to read on the footage. The last SUV had angled wrong. I finished the shift. The sun came up over the fields to the east the way it always did in January, gray and slow. My relief showed up at 6. I told him nothing. I just wanted to be out of the building. I sat in my car in the lot for a while with the plates on the receipt in my hand. Then I drove home and slept badly. 2 days later, I called the state troopers. Nebraska State Patrol, non-emergency line. I told the woman who answered that I worked overnights at the Sinclair off 312 and that I wanted to report something that probably wasn't anything, but I couldn't shake it. She was nice. She let me talk. I gave her the date, the time, the description, and the 6 plates. She was quiet for a second. Then she said, "Can you hold, please?" I held for maybe 4 minutes. A different voice came back on. A man this time. He asked me to repeat the date and the exit number. He asked whether the footage from that night still existed. I said yes. We kept 30 days. He asked me if I could stay at the station that evening and let a trooper come by to pull a copy. I said yes. They came at 11 the same night before my shift started. 2 of them. They didn't say much. They pulled the footage from the DVR onto a drive they brought. One of them wrote down the plates from my receipt, exactly as I had written them, and thanked me. They asked if I had talked to anyone about it. I said no. They asked me not to, at least for a while. I said okay. I heard nothing for about 6 weeks. Then one afternoon, a woman called. She said she was with the patrol and wanted to give me a courtesy update. She said they had run the plates. 2 of the 6 were registered to companies that, as far as they could tell, did not exist. Filed paperwork, real addresses, but no employees, no filings after the first year, nothing on the ground when someone went to look. The other 4 came back to different owners in 3 different states, and she did not tell me anything about those. She said the footage I had given them had been useful. She said it was consistent with something else they were already looking into. I remember the phrase because I asked her what it meant, and she said she could not tell me. She said she was not allowed to. I asked her if I was in any kind of danger. She paused, then said no, she did not think so, and that whatever it was not about me or the station. It had just happened to pass through. I asked what the group was. She said she could not tell me that either. I asked where they were going. Same answer. Then she thanked me twice, very deliberately, and told me that if I ever saw the same vehicles or the same jackets again, I should call the number she was going to give me and not 911. She read the number out. I wrote it on the same receipt, under the plates. I worked the station another year and change, and I never saw the jackets again, or anything close. Useful was enough for me. I stopped asking. The part that still sits with me is not the plates, and it is not the phone call. It is the perimeter woman. The one who walked the outside of the building, looked up at each camera, and then stood at the far corner of the lot facing east while everyone else did their 8 minutes. I have watched that stretch of footage a lot. She never checks a watch. She never looks toward the pumps. She does not shift her weight. At 4:05 and change, before any of the others start moving back to the cars, she turns around and walks to the van, on her own. Nobody signals her. Nobody calls out. There is no radio in her hand that I can see. She just knew when to go. There's a cave in Edwards County I've been monitoring since 2018. Nothing on a tourist map, nothing famous. Just a limestone system past a private ranch road, big enough to hold a maternity colony of Mexican free-tailed bats. Small enough that I'm the only one from the department who still bothers to drive out there twice a season. August 2021. I remember it because the emergence counts were down from July, and I was trying to figure out if it was heat stress or if my equipment was drifting. Around 8 in the evening, I parked at the fence line, walked the half-mile in, and set up at what we call the antechamber. It's a wide flat room, maybe 30 feet in from the actual entrance. Ceiling around 15 feet, the colony roosts back in a chimney further inside, and every evening they pour out through the antechamber like smoke going the wrong way. The job is boring, honestly. You sit on a folding stool with a clicker in one hand and an IR camera on a tripod pointed at the bottleneck. Every time a bat crosses the beam, you register it. Rough count on the clicker, precise count later from the footage. You wear a red headlamp so you don't scramble their eyes, and you keep the main flashlight off unless you need it. I settled in around 8:40, clicked on the camera, watched the first thin trickle start up around 9, right on time. It was a warm night, not brutal, but the kind of Texas warm where the rocks are still radiating from the afternoon and your shirt sticks to your back the second you stop moving. The air inside the cave is always cooler than outside in August, and there's a draft that comes from somewhere deeper in and pushes past you on its way out. That draft smells like wet stone and guano, and faintly, like something mineral I've never been able to place. You get used to it. After 3 years, I mostly don't notice it anymore. For about an hour, I did what I always do. Clicked. Adjusted the tripod once. Sipped water from a Nalgene. Listened to the bats. If you've never heard a freetail emergence, it doesn't really sound like anything you'd expect. There's the leathery paper sound of the wings, layered thousands of times over. There's the high chittering, most of it above what you can hear, but enough of it in range that you get this constant thin crackle, like static from an old radio somebody left on in the next room. Underneath all of it, there's your own breathing, which you start noticing after 20 minutes because there's nothing else at your level to focus on. Around 10 o'clock, I shifted on my stool because my left leg had gone numb, and I turned my head to look at the wall on my right. Somebody was sitting there, maybe 8 feet from me, on a low flowstone shelf that I'd walked past 100 times, sitting with his forearms resting on his knees, hands loose, watching the bats stream out. I want to be clear about what I did next, because I've had to explain it to enough people. I didn't scream, I didn't jump up, my brain didn't process him as a threat in the first second. My brain processed him as a mistake, like when you look at a coat on a chair and your eyes assemble a person out of it for half a second before you correct. I actually waited for the correction. I stared at that shape and waited for it to turn back into a rock formation. It didn't. He was in a dark button-up shirt, sleeves rolled to the elbow, dark pants, boots that looked like regular work boots, not caving boots, no pack, no belt, no helmet, no light of any kind. Just sitting there in the red spillover from my headlamp, comfortable, his face angled up toward the ceiling where the bats were coming through. I said something. I think I said, "Hey," or "Hi," just a normal reflex, the kind of thing you'd say if a coworker walked into the room while you were reading. He didn't look at me. He nodded once, very small, like he'd heard me and was acknowledging it, but didn't want to interrupt whatever he was watching. I sat there for maybe 5 seconds trying to reset. My head kept trying to build a story that made him make sense. Landowner's kid checking on me, some guy from the ranch, somebody I'd let pass me at the entrance without noticing. None of it worked, because I'd been in that antechamber for over an hour, and the only way in was through the beam of my camera, and nobody had crossed it. The camera clicks a little when it registers a warm body. I'd have heard it. I reached down slow and picked up the big flashlight I keep clipped to my pack. A Phoenix, 600 lumens, more than you need for anything short of a search. I clicked it on and put it on him. He squinted a little at the light, but he didn't flinch. He didn't shield his eyes. He just turned his head toward me and let me look at him. He was maybe 50, weathered face, the kind of tan that comes from working outside for decades. Gray at the temples, clean-shaven, ordinary. If I'd seen him at a gas station in Rock Springs, I would not have looked at him twice. He said, "Been a while since I was down here. It's still pretty, isn't it?" His voice was calm, not a whisper, not a stage voice for a cave. Regular indoor volume, the way you'd talk to somebody in a kitchen. I didn't answer. I couldn't figure out what the right answer was. He looked back up at the bats, watched them for another few seconds. Then he pushed himself up off the shelf with both hands, the way an older guy stands up after sitting too long, and he brushed the back of his pants with one palm. "You take care," he said, and he walked past me, deeper into the cave, not toward the entrance, deeper. Into the chimney passage that leads back to where the colony roosts, and past that into a section that drops. There's a squeeze about 40 feet in that opens into a vertical shaft. I've been to the top of that shaft exactly twice in 3 years, both times on a rope, both times with a partner topside, both times scared out of my mind. Below the shaft, the system opens up into levels that people who actually know what they're doing have mapped only in pieces. It's not somewhere you walk into in work boots at 10 at night without a light. I kept my flashlight on him until he was past the edge of the passage. He didn't look back. He didn't slow down. He walked at a comfortable pace, one hand trailing along the wall the way you do when you know a room in the dark. Then he was around the bend, and I couldn't see him anymore. I don't remember getting up. I remember standing outside the entrance with the camera and tripod under one arm and the stool still folded under the other, and I remember my truck being farther away than it should have been. I sat in the cab for a while with the doors locked and the interior light on. My hands were doing that thing where they shake without you telling them to. I called the ranch first because I had to, then the county. The ranger who came out was a guy named Diego, mid-30s, someone I'd met once at a permit meeting. He listened to me tell it twice. He didn't laugh, he didn't tell me I was tired. He just wrote it down and then radioed somebody else and asked for a second unit. They went in around midnight with real gear, 2 rangers, 1 guy from the local search team who does technical cave rescue. I stayed outside because they told me to. They were in there for close to 4 hours. I sat on the tailgate of my truck and watched the last of the bats come back in before dawn. They came out at 4:15. Nobody. No prints on the flowstone, no disturbed guano in the passages past the antechamber, nothing at the top of the shaft. They repelled the shaft, which I hadn't asked them to do. Nothing at the bottom either. No sign anyone had been down there in months. Diego pulled the SD card from the entrance camera the university keeps mounted on a juniper about 40 yards out. That camera is motion triggered and it covers the only opening. It's been there since 2019. He sat in his truck with a laptop and scrubbed through the whole day. 1 entry. Me at 7:52 p.m., 1 exit. Me at 10:06 p.m., moving fast. Nobody else, before or after. Not that day, not the day before, not the week before. Diego suggested, carefully, that maybe I'd had a guy come in another way. Some experienced caver, somebody who knew a back entrance. I told him what I'm telling you. There is no back entrance. The system has been surveyed. It ends in tight leads and sumps. You do not get in and out of that cave without going past that juniper. He nodded like he'd already figured I was going to say that. I've been back twice since, daylight only, both times with somebody else. The colony's fine. The counts are back up where they should be. The flowstone shelf where he was sitting is exactly the same as it's always been. No wear, no marks, nothing to say a man in work boots sat there for who knows how long watching bats. The part that stays with me isn't him showing up. It's the way he left. He walked into that passage the way you walk into your own bedroom at night. He didn't need to look. He didn't need a light. He said it had been a while, and he was right about it being pretty, and then he went home. I just don't know where home was. We moved into the place off Atlantic Boulevard the week after Labor Day. My husband, Ryan, had shipped out to Bahrain in July, and the lease on our old apartment was up. I needed something with a yard, something closer to my sister in Mandarin. The rental in Arlington was cheap for what it was. A 1-story with a screened porch, orange tile roof, a live oak in the front that dropped acorns like buckshot every time the wind picked up. 2 bedrooms, fenced yard. The landlord was some older guy named Curtis who lived up in Fernandina and didn't want to be bothered. My son, Micah, had just turned 2 in August. He was in that phase where words come out in weird little bursts. He'd say airplane 15 times a day, but couldn't say his own name. Everything at that age is a fascination or a war. I was tired all the time. I want to be honest about that up front, because I know how it sounds when I get to the rest of it. The house came furnished-ish. Old couch, kitchen table, the kind of curtains that come with a rental and stay with a rental. First week in, I was hunting for the hurricane shutters because a system was forming out past the Bahamas, and I'd never dealt with one on my own. Curtis had told me the shutters were in the attic, so up I went with a flashlight, in shorts, in September Florida heat, which is its own kind of punishment. The attic was mostly what you'd expect: fiberglass, ductwork, boxes shoved against the eaves. But near the hatch there was a shoebox, Nike, an older logo. Inside were photographs, loose ones, maybe 40 or 50. Some Polaroids, some regular 4x6 from a drugstore. A man, probably in his 50s, in most of them, tall, with gray in his beard, standing in what I recognized as the kitchen downstairs, back when the cabinets were a different color. Him at the beach, him at what looked like a birthday. In some, he was alone. In some, there was a woman I assumed was his wife, and a younger guy who might have been a son. I felt weird about it. Not scared. Just weird. The way you feel when you find someone's mail. I took the box down, put it on the top shelf of the hall closet, and figured I'd give it to Curtis next time he came around. Then the storm turned north, the shutters stayed where they were, and I forgot about the whole thing for about 2 months. Micah started pointing in October. I want to be careful here because I've read enough of these stories to know how the setup goes, and I promise I'm not dressing it up. He was sitting in his high chair eating those little puff snacks, and he pointed at the corner of the dining room, past the china cabinet, and said, "Uncle?" Clear as anything. It was the first time he'd ever said the word. I turned. Nothing there. Just the wall and a nail where a picture must have hung once. I said, "Uncle who, buddy?" He kept eating. "We don't have an uncle. My brother lives in Oregon, and Micah has met him twice. Ryan's an only child." The word came from nowhere, and I didn't think about it too hard because 2-year-olds are little parrots. They pick things up off the TV, from strangers at Publix, from other kids at daycare. I probably said uncle myself in some sentence, and it stuck. It happened again a week later. Same corner. He was pushing a truck around on the floor, and he sat up on his knees and looked at the wall and said it, "Uncle," and then he laughed. That was the part I didn't love, the laugh. Not because it was creepy on its own, kids laugh at nothing, but because he was looking at the wall like there was someone standing there being goofy for him, peekaboo face. I checked the room after he went down for his nap. Nothing. The AC vent was in that corner, and it clicked and hummed the way old central air does in Florida houses. I told my sister about it on the phone, and she laughed and said Micah was probably going to be an actor or a serial killer, one of the two. I laughed too. That was a Tuesday. Around the middle of November, my mom flew down from Ohio for a week. She slept on the pullout in the living room. The second night she was there, she came into the kitchen while I was making coffee and asked me if I ever heard the humming. I said, "What humming?" She said, "Around 3:30, there's this low sound, almost too low to hear, more of a pressure than a noise." She thought maybe a neighbor's pool pump. I hadn't noticed anything, but I sleep with a white noise machine because Micah's room shares a wall with mine and I'd go crazy otherwise. She left on a Sunday. That Sunday night is the one I keep coming back to. Micah woke up around 2. Not crying, just fussing, that half-awake whine. I brought him into my bed, which I try not to do, and he fell back asleep on my chest. I was almost gone myself when I heard him say it into my collarbone. "Uncle," half asleep, sleepy little voice. Then he sighed and was out. I lay there. My eyes were open in the dark, and I felt that thing where you're too tired to be scared, but your body's already ahead of you, chest tight, hands cold. I told myself he was dreaming. Kids talk in their sleep. My husband talks in his sleep. I got up around 6, before Micah, because I couldn't lie there anymore. I walked out into the hall to make coffee, and the closet door was open. Not wide, a few inches, and the shoebox was on the floor. Not tipped, not fallen. Set down, lid off, next to it. The photos were still mostly in the box, in a neat stack, except one, which was lying by itself on the hallway rug about a foot away from the box. Face up, it was him, the gray-bearded man, standing in what I now recognized as the doorway of Micah's room, holding a cake with candles on it, smiling at whoever took the picture. I want to describe what I did next accurately because I've replayed it a lot. I didn't scream, I didn't call anyone. I stood there in the hallway in my husband's old navy t-shirt and I looked at that photograph for probably a full minute. Then I picked it up by the corner, put it back in the box, put the lid on, and put the box on top of the fridge instead of in the closet. Then I made coffee. Then I sat at the kitchen table, and I cried a little, quietly, so Micah wouldn't hear when he woke up. I didn't sleep in the house that night. I packed a bag and drove to my sister's in Mandarin and told her the AC was acting up. I don't know why I lied. I think I was embarrassed. In the daylight, driving over the Buckman Bridge with Micah singing in the back seat, it already sounded stupid. A box fell over, a door was open, my kid said a word. I stayed at my sister's for 4 days. When I came back to the house, I went next door first, to the woman on the west side. Her name was Denise, retired teacher, husband long gone, 3 cats. I talked to her exactly twice before, both times about garbage day. I had the photograph in my back pocket. I asked her if she recognized the man. She squinted at it on her front step. Then she said, "Oh honey, that's Walter. He rented that place, must be 4 or 5 years ago now. Sweet man. He passed in the house. In his sleep, they said. His son came and cleaned it out." She said it the way you say things about people who've been gone a while. Not spooky, just sad. I asked her which room. She said she didn't know, she wasn't sure anyone had told her. I thanked her and went home. I stood in the hallway for a long time, then I called Curtis. Curtis, to his credit, drove down that weekend. I told him about the humming my mother had mentioned. I didn't tell him the rest. He went under the house in his coveralls and came out an hour later saying 2 of the copper lines were running against a joist without any padding, and the water heater's expansion tank was shot, and something about the pressure creating a resonance in the pipes when the AC kicked on at night. He said his cousin in Gainesville had the same thing, and it drove his wife nuts. He said he'd fix it. He also looked at the hall closet because I asked him to, and pointed out that the transom window above the front door didn't seat properly. When the AC compressor cycled off, air moved through the house in a specific way. Enough to nudge a lightweight closet door open if it wasn't latched. I hadn't been latching it. That was the explanation. A drafty transom, an unbalanced pressure system, a stack of photos where the top one slid off when the box tipped over from the door swinging into it, a 2-year-old who liked the vent in the corner because it made a sound the rest of us couldn't quite hear. Walter had died in his sleep in this house, which is the kind of quiet, ordinary death people have all the time, and none of it added up to anything except a series of small things happening on top of each other. I know that. I understood it then, and I understand it now. I still finished out the lease. 3 more months. I kept the photos on top of the fridge in a Ziploc bag, and I gave them to Curtis when I handed him the keys in February. I told him about Walter. He said he knew. He said the son had told him to throw the shoebox out and he'd forgotten it was up there. Micah stopped saying uncle sometime in December. I don't remember exactly when. He moved on to other words the way kids do. He doesn't remember the house at all. He's 4 now, and if you ask him about Jacksonville, he'll tell you about the beach and the little green lizards on the porch. That's it. We live in Norfolk now, in base housing, and the walls are thin, and the neighbors are loud, and I sleep better than I did in that rental. That's the only part of it I can't quite explain to myself, and I've stopped trying.